Washington Journal continues.
Our guest is former U.S. Senator Bob Graham, who served as a Democrat for the state of Florida from 1987 to 2005. He's also the co-author of a book, America, the Owner's Manual. Thank you for coming on the program today.
Great. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Before we talk about some of the details in your book and a couple of intelligence-related matters, considering your background and experience, there have been calls, bipartisan calls for an investigation into the potential influx of Russia's influence in the election. First of all, what do you think about the calls as you hear them, and what's facing the intelligence community and Congress in this matter?
Well, first, I think the calls are very appropriate. I've been calling since September of 2001 to get all the information out about the Saudi role in 9/11. Just in the last few months beginning to see some progress. I hope that this investigation doesn't take the better part of 15 years to get started and completed. It's important to the American people. I think it's also important to the American people that they know that there's a good relationship between the president and the intelligence agencies. The purpose of the intelligence agencies is to provide to the president strategic advice that he could not get through normal channels. Oftentimes that strategic advice is the key to good decisions that help protect the security, advance the interest of the United States. It is very counterproductive for there to be a public clash between the intelligence agencies and the commander-in-chief.
We even heard the president-elect talk about his questioning of the CIA investigation and looking into these matters. What does this mean going forward, especially as he becomes president?
Well, it's not a happy sign in terms of what the long-term relationships are going to be. And it's, in addition to involving the intelligence agencies, it also involves the Congress. The Congress has a responsibility to provide oversight of the intelligence agencies. I had the privilege to serve on that committee for 10 years, and I think this is exactly the kind of issue that congressional oversight is intended to provide.
Bob Graham, again, our guest. The book that he has now co-written, America, the Owner's Manual, talks about this idea of increasing civic engagement. Why are you so concerned about these matters?
One of the things that we learned of many out of this recent presidential election is how dissatisfied so many Americans are with their federal government. The federal government has probably seldom been in as low an esteem as an institution and individual parts of the federal government than it is today. What are some of the prescriptions, the remedies to try to restore what people like John Adams talked about in terms of the closeness of the people to their government? I think one of those is to get the people more directly involved in their government. There's been a feeling that you can't fight City Hall, just whatever government does, you've got to take it. That's not true. There are many examples of where American citizens have seen a problem with government, its action or inaction, and have fixed it. And our book provides the essential skills necessary to achieve that, as well as many case studies of how it has been achieved and advice from professionals, people who are in or out of public office, political consultants, academics, as to how to go about implementing these skills of citizenship.
What is the one thing a person could do to directly get involved, especially if he or she may feel disenfranchised from the whole process?
Well, first, you've got to feel that you can be involved. You have to be passionate about the issue. As one example of a case study, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That group started in a living room in Sacramento, California, of a lady whose 13-year-old daughter had just been killed by a drunk driver. She was grieving, but also motivated to avoid that same tragedy for other mothers. And so with her friends, they established an organization which in a relatively short period of time has cut the level of deaths attributable to drunk driving in the United States by almost half.
Senator Bob Graham, the book is called America, an Owner's Manual. He served in the Senate representing the state of Florida from 1987 to to 2005. We have calls lined up for you, sir.
Great.
Our first one is
Thanks,
from
Pedro.
New York, Democrats line. Gary, you're on with Senator Bob Graham. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Senator. From Miami Lakes, Florida. I know Miami Lakes. It's a wonderful community that Bob Graham's family created. But having said that, I'd like to make the point and hopefully get a response from the senator about the politicization of the CIA. And let me give an example that I think most listeners will be familiar with. 1 week before the invasion of Iraq, George Tenet, the then CIA chief, walked into the Oval Office and said, "Mr. President, it's a slam dunk. Those weapons of mass destruction are there." Well, we know what happened after the invasion. They weren't there. Now, wouldn't you think that the president would be angry at getting some false information? He was not. Wouldn't you also think the Senate and the House Intelligence Oversight Committees would have been outraged and would have started another church committee? No, they did not. In fact, a few months after that, George Tenet, the CIA chief that gave our president bad information, was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In attendance were many members of the House and the Intelligence Committees applauding.
Gary, thank you.
Well, Gary, first, thank you for your kind remarks about my hometown of Miami Lakes. But a few corrections. In fact, the Intelligence Committee did hold hearings both in public, mainly in closed session, on the run-up to the Iraq War. We demanded that there be produced what had not previously been produced, which was a comprehensive intelligence analysis. And based on that, I voted against the war in Iraq, as did a number of other members of the Intelligence Committee who were exposed to that in-depth analysis. And after 9/11, there was a joint inquiry commission established, made up of the members of the House and the Senate Intelligence Committee, which spent the better part of a year gathering information on the role of the intelligence agencies in 9/11, published an 800-page report, one chapter of which primarily related to the financing of 9/11 and pointed a finger at Saudi Arabia, was withheld from the public for 13 years. Finally, this July, was made available. While I would not claim perfection, I think the oversight committees of the Congress were diligent and did all that was in their power to provide to the American people the truth about what happened on 9/11.
From Hilliard, Florida, Independent line. Bruce, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Mr. Graham, I've always supported you. I've always supported Democrats. But I've got a message for you and all the Democrats. If you do not use the same strategy the Republicans used against Barack Obama for 8 years, I'm done with the Democrats. Now, there's no sense in y'all sitting there and being run over by Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So y'all got a chance now to do something good, and that's oppose, block, filibuster, delay, and do not approve the next Supreme Court justice this maniac is going to appoint.
Well, Bruce, I would agree with you if you are suggesting that there should be examples and specific issues, such as the next U.S. Supreme Court member, which the Democrats should make a strong stand in defense on behalf of the American people. But I don't agree that we ought to adopt, for instance, the policy that the Republican leader of the Senate did when Barack Obama was elected, which is to say the number one objective of Republicans in the Senate is to keep Barack Obama from being reelected. And regardless of what the issue was, they opposed, delayed, frustrated the president. And I believe the American people were similarly frustrated and they showed that frustration, maybe in a peculiar way, at this election by electing the candidate who appeared to be the most like that guy in the movie who shouted out into the night, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." Well, they used the opportunity to vote for the unusual candidate to convey a message that they were mad as hell and aren't going to take it anymore. Our democracy can't function with people yelling at each other. It functions when people work together, understand that they have a responsibility to the American people, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, or independents, to do those things that the federal government can do to make their life better and to make this nation more secure.
From Edisto Island, South Carolina, Republican line. Mary, go ahead.
My name is Mary Lammers. I live in Edisto Beach, South Carolina, and I wanted to call and say that I'm tired of hearing this big story about the Russians supposedly hacked into the DNC's computers and they stole the election for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was elected because the people of this country are tired of not having any decent jobs. They're tired of having regulations thrown around their neck for every little thing that they do in this world, like telling our children, our girl children, that they have to go to the bathroom with boys. I mean, this is ridiculous. These people that are saying that our children have to do that, they send their kids to private schools, so that doesn't have to happen. All right? I'm tired of Nancy Pelosi standing up and saying, well, you can only work 30 hours a week now, but then you'll have some time for special events for yourself. Well, you know what? The common people in this country, they need 40 hours a week work. They don't need two or three part-time jobs. You Democrats need to get over the election because the people elected Donald Trump. And
Thanks, caller.
Yeah, Mary, I don't believe this issue is about whether Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States. He was elected under our electoral college system, and he will be the next president of the United States. But this issue of a foreign government being involved in our elections, making what is alleged to have been a conscious decision to support one candidate over the other and then using their technical capabilities to achieve that objective is very, very unacceptable. We can't have foreigners determining who the elected officials in our democracy will be. So as I said earlier, I'm a strong supporter of Congress accepting its oversight responsibility, try to get to the bottom of this case of did Russia play a role in trying to influence the outcome of this election? And if so, what sanctions should the United States have? I don't think we can afford to do what we've done with Saudi Arabia for 15 years, which is to have very compelling information that they were involved in 9/11 and do nothing, because what that has done is encouraged Saudi Arabia to continue to support terrorist organizations. And I believe if we send the same signal to Russia, that it can involve itself in our presidential elections without any response, that we're just going to encourage more evil and inappropriate behavior.
Pat from West Virginia, Democrats line.
Good morning to you, Pedro. I haven't called in for several months, but one of the people who called in earlier when the two gentlemen were there, also good morning to the senator.
Thank you.
He had a comment about unions, and he said that right to work was the right way to go. Well, I have a comment about that. I keep hearing this over and over again, this right to work. There is not one state in this whole country that has any laws that state that if you do not want to belong to a union or go to work somewhere where a union is in place, that you can't go right down the street to the nearest place that's non-union and get yourself a job. That's a fact.
Okay, since that was the last segment, we'll leave it there. Let's go to Brett in Searchlight, Nevada, independent line.
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning. Are you from Harry Reid's hometown?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'd like to go there sometime. Harry talks about it all the time, and we all have come to know Searchlight very well.
Yeah, we're a pretty small town, but we get along together, and that's the biggest part. The question I had about you, you want citizens to increase engagement with their government. I recommend that everybody that, if your congressman or senate isn't working, you call them and let them know. You know, I do it all the time. When I lived in Arizona, I'm sure Senator McCain got tired of me calling him.
What was the response that you got when you called, Brett? What kind of response did you get?
Didn't get any.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, Brett, that certainly is appropriate. Obviously, people should register, they should vote, they should be participants in all the ways of democracy. But don't forget that you do not have to wait for an elected official to take action. You have the rights and responsibilities as a citizen of the United States of America to make a difference. I use the example of the women in Sacramento who in a few years were the principal force in cutting in half the number of deaths attributable to drunk driving in the United States. They used government, but they didn't wait for government. They took the initiative. And that's what I am urging, that people who feel passionate about issues, they need to have the skills of how to go about this. This is not just something that you pick up in the play yard. You have to know what the skills and how to use them are, and then you have to be persistent. Government doesn't typically act quickly, and you have to be prepared to play the marathon game, not the 100-yard dash, if you're going to be successful.
June is from Brooksville, Florida, Republican line.
Good morning. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
I have a question about the voting in Florida. There was places that they was rigging for Hillary. How come you don't check into that?
I'm sorry, I missed what was happening?
The voting in Florida this year showed and was proven there was places that they were rigging for Hillary. And we watched it.
All right.
Florida.
This would be a perfect, ma'am, let me say, this is a perfect example of what a citizen can do. If you believe that there is credible evidence that there was some rigging of the election in Florida, what you ought to do is to find out what official is responsible for monitoring those elections. And in the case of Florida, it would be your county supervisor of elections. Go to him or her with the information that you have. If you have other friends who have evidence that there was bad behavior at the election, bring them along with you. Let the newspapers or television stations know what you're doing so that the public will be better informed. There are steps that you can take as a citizen which will make a difference.
Senator, we've heard the term from this past election, frequently used fake news that comes from the internet and other sources. What do you think about the rise of this type of information? And what do you think about traditional news sources? And are people still engaging in reading newspapers and things like that in order to gain information to make decisions?
Well, the facts are that all of the traditional means of political communication, newspapers, radio, television, have seen a decline in their audience and their influence, and particularly in the case of television, a dilution by the number of channels that are providing news, frequently heavily partisan in one direction or the other. I think one of the things that has contributed to the current low standing of government in the eyes of its people is that the people don't know very much about their government. We stopped teaching civics in America in about 1970. We've gone from an average of 3 one-year classes between the 7th and the 12th grade to 0 civics in our schools. I think that has been a major contributor to the frustration and the alienation of voters. And I hope that one of the results of this election will be a re-examination not only of whether we should teach civics, the answer to which is a resounding of course, but also what kind of civics. We shouldn't be teaching spectator civics where all we do is teach the students to sit in the stands and watch democracy. We need to teach them the skills where they can be an active player and make a difference in democracy.
Here is Tony from Kokomo, Indiana.
Yeah, Senator Graham. The man a while ago, he was talking to you about Democrats are going to stop voting for you guys if you go along with these Republicans.
Yes,
it started out that Mitch McConnell said, we're going to make sure he's a one-term president. They shut down the Senate. Nothing got done at all. And then the people punished the Democrats. The Republicans took over the Senate. The Democrats worked with the Senate. The people rewarded the Republicans. If you guys go along with the Democrats or with the Republicans again, you're going to lose us Democrats because we aren't going to vote for you. It's time to stand up to these Republicans because they're cleaning our clock. We will go to a third party.
What I've said is, yes, the Democrats ought to stand up where there's a matter of principle. If, for instance, President Trump nominates an out-of-the-mainstream person to be the next U.S. Supreme Court member, Democrats should protest, point that out, and use whatever means are available to them. But on something like the proposed program of infrastructure, I think the Democrats need to be cooperating because that's so critical to the future of this country. And another issue which I think is critical, I'm going to be presenting later today as co-chairman of a Lumina Foundation Commission on Higher Education, a proposal that we think is the equivalent of the GI Bill of the 1940s to increase the number of Americans who have some form of education after high school, whether it's a vocational certificate, a community college associate degree, or a 4-year baccalaureate degree. We need substantially more higher educated Americans if America is going to be competitive in the 21st century economically and politically.
Senator Bob Graham with us, served in the Senate from 1987 to 2005, co-author of the book America, the Owner's Manual. Fort Wayne, Indiana, Independent Line. Justin, hi there.
Yeah, hi. And on the issue of civic engagement, I wanted to throw out the idea of maybe taking a step towards direct democracy without involving the Constitution via like the rules of debate and procedure in the House or Senate. You could somehow give a voice, maybe via online mechanisms, kind of like change.org, to allow citizens to have their input directly impacting the debate, like maybe in a committee. Maybe you could have like a virtual vote, maybe through change.org, like you could let people actually have a vote on a specific amendment or a specific bill in committee. I mean, there are tons of different configurations that I think it'd be interesting to think about how that could work, via maybe online tools and not necessarily constitutionally changing anything, but just by changing the rules of the House. I mean, it could be experimented with on limited measures just to see how it works. I mean, it could have increased the problems we have with like special interests, but it could also force people to debate actual issues instead of making politics what it is now is basically entertainment. It's kind of like high school level entertainment. This team versus that team, this popularity contest versus that. But I think if we get people engaged in the actual issues potentially with some sort of direct democracy push or initiative, we might be able to get people to actually, be rational and actually look at facts and have facts matter again.
Well, I congratulate you for being so creative. There are a number of possibilities in which there can be greater citizen involvement without having to amend the Constitution of the United States to do it. This is a little bit off your specific set of examples, but in the earlier panel, Congressman Romer and LaHood mentioned the fact that many states, including Florida, now prohibit members of the legislature from raising money, soliciting money while the legislature is in session. It looks unseemly for a legislator on Monday to have gone to a special interest and ask for a $1,000 contribution to their campaign, and then on Tuesday, as a member of the legislature, vote on a measure which benefited that special interest. Congress, I think, ought to pass a rule, and that's all it would take. Doesn't take a law, it certainly doesn't take a constitutional change, to just say that we will not solicit money while the Congress is in session. I think that would be an example of the kind of direct citizen involvement, because it would increase the confidence of the citizens that the legislator was representing their interest and not the last person who'd solicited a campaign contribution.
Brenda, Omaha, Nebraska, Republican line.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I've been an independent for years until I watched C-SPAN for the last couple of years. I turned to Republican after I started watching the hearings. And I heard you say that we need to have hearings on the Russia thing. But during the hearings on Hillary Clinton, or really anything against the Democrats, all the Democrats did was lecture and not even participate. And that was the reason I switched from independent to Republican. And as far as the Russian thing, it's been used so much. It's kind of like the Brady thing when she'd go, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. It's the Russians, Russians, Russians.
Well, first, I think the fact that the C-SPAN caused you to reassess your party affiliation is an indication of how important programs like the one that we're sharing today are. And the fact that you changed your party because you saw the Democrats as being too obstructionist or too unwilling to listen to other issues is a message that the public is tired of hearing politicians squabble at each other. They want to have a civil, thoughtful, respectful of the public display of their public office. Going back again to this Russian thing, if the allegations that have been made are true, it is a very, very serious matter of a foreign government making a conscious decision to try to influence the outcome of a U.S. election. And I think all Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, would agree with that, and that we need to know the facts. It would be, I think, a great disservice to our democracy if, like in 9/11, we'd be 12 or 15 years after the event still squabbling over whether the American people are going to be given the information as to why the event was considered to be important. So thank you for your call. I think you have made a number of good points.
Senator, there are a lot of confirmation hearings destined for the Senate. What is it going to be like to be a minority Democrat in the Senate, especially facing the hearing process and the vote process?
Well, I can just tell you my policy was that as it related to appointments to the executive branch, where the president is selecting the person that he or she wants to be Secretary of State or Agriculture or whatever it is, I gave a high level of deference to the executive. These are his people. They're going to be working in his or her name. He ought to have individuals that he or she has confidence in. Now, it's different with the judiciary, because the way the Constitution was constructed, the selection of the members of the judiciary was to be an equal role for the Congress and for the president. And there, I think the standard is considerably higher for confirmation, and I believe that's where a lot of the fireworks are going to occur, particularly with this first appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court.
How many votes are going to be needed in the Senate, and can those rules change about how they do that?
Well, several years ago, the Senate changed the rules relative to filibuster for judicial offices and said essentially that with the exception of the Supreme Court, the filibuster will not apply to judicial appointments. But the big exception is the Supreme Court, and so if there is a contested nomination, it would take 60 votes to shut down the debate and then move to a vote on the individual. So the magic number for Supreme Court justices is 60.
From Mason, Ohio, independent line, Tom, hi there.
Hi. Thanks for C-SPAN. We got to remember, folks, this is not the Democratic Party that we had when Mr. Kennedy was president. That was the last time I voted Democrat. He would be turning over in his grave hearing these socialists speak the way they are. We got to remember that we do not have a socialistic government, but we are, aren't we? How do you answer that, sir?
When I was studying economics, I was taught that we have a mixed economy. We have an economy which is primarily capitalist, driven by private sector decisions, but in which the government plays an important supportive role. Going back to this subject of infrastructure, historically, from the very beginning of the country, it was government, primarily the federal government, that built the roads, the canals, the other things that began to knit these 13 new states into a new nation. And I think things like that and areas of fundamental research, the things that we take for granted today, such as the computer that Pedro is looking at, were largely developed because of government defense, intelligence, and space programs. So we have a mixed economy, and the political challenge is to figure out what that mix should be.
From Oklahoma, Republican line, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to make some comments about the senator's really sad and pathetic statements about the Russia involvement, if there is one. The bottom line is they wouldn't have been able to expose Hillary's emails if she didn't use that illegal server. So that's a ridiculous stance completely, and it's pretty sad. And then your statement about the people not being aware of what the government's doing, we're well aware. Gladly, more Americans are waking up to what you all have been doing or not doing, and they're sick of it. And your stance is totally horrible. You know, you're still whining about that, and I don't get your point at all.
Well, sir, I'm not whining, and I'm not taking a position. I'm just saying that I think this is an important enough issue that the American people should have the full information as to what happened. Now, there'll be a debate as to what that means. Some people will say it's trivial and dismiss it. Others will say, you know, it's World War III time. And I think one of the fundamentals of democracy is a relationship in which the government treats the people as adults with respect and confidence in the people's good judgment. And I don't think that has been done relative to 9/11, and I don't want to see it repeated as to the role of the Russians. It may be, sir, that you're absolutely right. Frankly, I hope you're right. I hope we would not find out that the Russians were trying to meddle in our elections, but I think we should know and not 50 years from now still be worrying about what happened and dealing with conspiracy theories.
Pat lives in Nebraska, independent line. Hi, Pat.
Hi. My comment is that Americans are trying to be involved, but we have things like when our votes are being stifled by things like that voter cross-check, that rendered how many of our votes just not even counted. It's disheartening. And then we do have an incoming president who can't even be bothered to do his job and go to national security meetings and briefings. So that's my comment, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, again, the point that I'm trying to make, and that is made through this book, is that you don't have to just wait to be certain that your vote is cast and counted. There are so many other ways in our democracy where a citizen can be directly involved and can make a difference. But it takes passion, skills, persistence for citizens to do that. I believe this book provides a lot of encouraging examples of where that has happened, and the book provides a clear roadmap as to how you can, on the issue that you feel passionate about, make a difference. If you think that the election system in your state has been taken over, distorted, then you as a citizen can do something about that. You don't have to wait for somebody else to take the initiative.
Real quick, the comments she made about the President-elect Trump and his intelligence briefing, CNN saying now that 3 times a week now apparently he's doing. Is this do you think it's a necessary thing to have this done every day, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of what the president's inclination is. Some presidents got very down into the weeds of the intelligence daily briefing. Others used it as more of a general outline or suggestion of activities. I think that's up to the individual who happens to occupy the White House. I would not say that one is more patriotic or more committed to their job than the other because they hear it 1, 3, or 7 times a week.
And when they're delivered to the president-elect, what's the level of depth in the information? Does he need someone there to kind of walk him through what this means and that kind of thing? How does that work?
Well, they are quite detailed. They tend to be on a specific topic, and they will have in the room the people who are responsible for producing that particular presidential briefing paper. In many ways, it's a means of starting a dialogue. One of the things the intelligence community does, for instance, is fill in the gaps. 80% of what the president needs to know to make a decision you can read about or see on television. It's that final 20% that the intelligence community is responsible for filling. And so the president may say to the briefers, look, I want more information on points 1, 7, 13, and 24 in this report. And they take those instructions, and the next time they have a briefing, they will fill out the areas that the president had felt were deficient. That's the back and forth that typically goes on with the presidential briefing by the intelligence community.
Our guest served as the chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence from 2001 to 2003, was a senator from 1987 to 2005, representing the state of Florida. Bob Graham, also the co-author of the book America, the Owner's Manual. Thank you, Senator, for being with us.
Good. Thank you very much, and thank you to your very informed viewers.
Coming up, we're going to hear from